Welcome to
That's High Praise,
a Nicolas Cage podcast. I am your co-host, Captain Nostalgia.
And I am your co-host, Micah Kimber.
We got to come up with like a catchy...
I'm going to say it again with the not having like a kitschy nickname.
I don't know what you would be.
It's fine. I have thought about it one day, and I was like, well, if you're Captain Nostalgia, does that mean I am like Major something? I don't know. It's fine.
You'll eventually get there.
Maybe it can be like a Patreon thing. Like, if you're at this level, you get to give me a nickname.
At that point, you would have to... So Cam's dad is actually our highest patron.
Yeah.
So we should just like have him like make up a name for you.
It's true.
But on this episode, we're talking about Rocket Man.
Yeah, you know, the Elton John song?
No.
The Disney Channel original movie?
Yeah, no, was it a Disney Channel? No, I'm pretty sure it was theatrical release, that one. No, we were talking about The Rock, 1996. I guess we should preface that we're not doing a deep dive into Dwayne Johnson.
Yeah.
At all.
Not yet.
Not yet. It might come later down the line.
The Rock and Nicolas Cage have a movie together.
I'm for it.
Same.
Plot twist, he's just going to show up in Black Adam.
As Superman?
Yeah. It's like that universe's like version of Superman.
It'd be amazing.
But this was a first time viewing for both of us. This movie celebrates 25 years this year.
Yeah. Which
is incredible. Co-stars Sean Connery and Ed Harris.
Yep.
And since this movie like starts out with Ed Harris, can we low-key like talk about how like Ed Harris is basically kind of like a humanized version of Thanos? Like he's willing to like sacrifice. Like his like motives are like actually like in the good spot.
And it's just justice. Yeah.
I hate it when a movie like makes me align myself with the villain because I'm always like, am I a bad person?
Sure. Yeah. But I think the fact of the matter is he still wanted to like, you know, instead of taking his concerns properly to the right people, he wants to do something terrible to get what he wants. I don't know.
So he actually says in this movie, he has a line that says, "This isn't about money; it's about justice."
Right. Which honestly, I gotta call his bluff on that one.
How so?
I really do. I don't know. I feel like that's a little spoilery, a little early because we're talking third act stuff.
All right. I guess let's jump into like general thoughts.
Sure.
What did you think about this movie?
I loved it. I thought it was a blast.
Same.
There were some kind of in between the first and second act. There were times when I was just like, I'm not sure if this movie is really like focusing enough on the right things. Like it seems to set up this whole big sort of, you have a what's it called? You know, when you have people and they're being threatened,
hostages.
Well, it sets up a whole like hostage situation, but then the movie like barely touches on it until like the third act. And so for a while I was just like, why are we dabbling in all these other things? But I think the movie's great. I think it pulls everything together really well.
See, I was on the opposite end. I really love this movie. And I think that this is probably one of the better paced movies I've recently seen. Like,
sure.
I think that they develop each character really significantly well. I mean, right out of the gate, Ed Harris's Frank Hubble
yep.
is just developed extraordinarily well within like the first like 15 minutes of this movie.
Yeah, I mean, he is the first like 10-15 minutes.
Yeah. And then like I think they do a really good job at also doing Nicolas Cage's character. How am I blanking on names?
Yeah, Stanley Goodspeed.
I have IMDb pulled up right in front of me, too.
Stanley
I feel
Goodspeed.
So ashamed. Yeah, and then John Patrick Mason, who is Sean Connery's character in this. And but yeah, I thought that like there were a couple times like during the second act where like why are we spending time with these characters? Like this just feels like filler content.
Right.
But I feel like that's kind of like a Michael Bay motif.
Sure.
By now, Michael Bay, spoiler alert, does direct this movie. This is one of his earlier films. This was his follow-up to Bad Boys.
Okay. Wow.
So significantly different.
Yeah. For sure.
But
Not
this
a buddy
is
cop movie.
This is still when he's like in his prime.
Yeah.
Peak Michael Bay right here. But I really, really enjoyed this movie. I thought that just everything about it was just phenomenally well done.
Yeah.
Except for those like filler sequences here.
Even then, I feel like there were some filler sequences, like stupid little bits of dialogue, like stuff that I was like, okay, he's a Beatles nut, and spent $600 on a vinyl, which is fair. But like, it feels like for the longest time that is useless information. And then they like slowly work that kind of thing back into his character. So yeah, I feel like there are times when there's like certain scenes and certain dialogue feel like really filler like, but I think it comes around.
I think this movie could have probably benefited from like 10 to 15 minutes like shaved off of it. Like all like the
I feel like that about every single movie I've ever watched. So
I feel like all the stuff up in the beginning about like him being ready to be a father, like his girlfriend being Catholic, like even like to your point too about like some of the hostages, like there are like cutaway scenes where like the hostages are like being shot and like being explored. I'm just like, I don't really feel like I need this.
Sure.
Like this just feels like filler content to me.
Yeah. Like
you could have still taken and had the same story. It would have just been tighter. I think I would have probably preferred maybe more time spent with Connery's daughter rather than some of the like the extra stuff that we got with Cage.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can definitely see that. That's how I feel about just Sean Connery's character in general. There were definitely times where, like, I personally, I don't know if you felt this way, Josh, but I personally felt like really attached to the character really immediately. Not just as a Sean Connery fan, although that I am. I felt really like they bring him in and he's mysterious and he never stops being mysterious and he's very intriguing for that reason. And so it's kind of like Hannibal and Silence of the Lambs, where it's just like, he's such a compelling character, and he's not on the screen long enough. And that's sometimes how I felt in general about his character.
Yeah, I could understand that, especially like when you meet him and he's kind of like, he's in chains, and just something about like the idea of like this like James Bond archetype.
Right.
Being like in chains and like being like this like monster that's so terrifying that like we've locked him up and we threw away the key. Like his like first probably like half of the time that he spends on screen, like you just kind of find that, and then like there are these like little twists and turns that you make
for sure
with his character that I was just kind of like, man, like they really humanize him. Like the more that you kind of get to see these people, the more that you realize that, man, actually, the villain in this really isn't. It's not Mason. It's not Hubble, but it ends up actually being the government. Which,
hey, interesting.
Spoiler alert! Like let's just get in there. Hear me out.
Sure.
Because I'm gonna treat this microphone as kind of therapy for the and say some pretty controversial things. I feel like.
Okay.
So. The last year of kind of going through Black history and learning more about everything that had kind of been kept from me as a kid about American history and the way that like we've rewritten and kind of like tried to shape the narrative in like our own way. I felt that way when Hubble would talk about the veterans that like he watched die being protected under American orders, that their families never got any compensation, and that is a whole nother rabbit trail.
Sure, yeah.
But like that, and then like when you find out like what Mason went through and like what he endured with, basically being imprisoned with no trial.
Yeah.
like, man, like the government is the real villain in this movie, and like, I mean, I think to people, even, you know, we're two white guys talking about a movie with a primarily white cast.
Yeah, I actually have a couple things to point out all along this narrative.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Not to interrupt you, but to add on to your point too, like there are so many times during like the scenes where you'll see him like all sitting around a table and you have government officials or whatever, and basically anytime a solid decision is made for like at least up to like the second act, it's all like, oh, we'll just lie about this. Like that's just like a passable tactic. You know, and that's, first of all, that's just not okay. But yeah, I really feel like in a lot of ways this movie is kind of built to make the government the bad guy, or to call the government out for, you know, irresponsibilities on their end. And the other thing, and I'm really glad you pointed out, like you said, you've learned a lot over the past year about like Black history in America and things like that, because there are, I think, 3 African Americans in this film. I believe it's a total of 3, and they all die.
Yeah,
and they're all killed. Yeah, like it's not just like accidents. It's not just like they're all like killed. Yeah, and I'm wondering. And okay, I'm not usually one of those guys who's just like, you know, accuses movie makers of whitewashing everything. I just don't like to be that guy, because I don't like to like accuse people of things just in general. Like, you know, the cast you get's the cast you get sometimes. And so I'm not taking that angle, but I am taking the angle of like, I wonder if that was intentional. I wonder if it was intentional to like the motif of pointing out like the government hiding things, lying about things. I wonder if the fact that there were only a few black guys and the fact that they all died.
So there are 3, and I'm currently on IMDb right now. Tony Todd, obviously, the Candyman.
Yeah.
Which I was super excited about it. Him and Nicolas Cage have probably one of my favorite scenes in this entire movie.
It's fantastic, yeah.
Like the standoff, like I was like, I didn't know I needed this until this moment. But a very young Bokeem Woodpine, who is just gone on to do incredible stuff. For all you MCU guys out there, he was the Shocker in Spider-Man Homecoming. He's done Fargo. He did Queen and Slim recently. He's got Halo coming up, the Ghostbusters Afterlife. I mean, he's just done a significant amount of terrific roles, and also starred in Sopranos, Wishmaster 2. I mean, he's had quite a career, and he just delivers dynamic performances every single time he's on screen. And the third black gentleman, we don't actually like. He's like 2 scenes in this entire thing.
It's not a lot.
But I don't know. I think it might just honestly be a product of its time. And I say that with knowing full well that Good Burger was only a year away. And that was led by Kenan and Kel.
Right.
But that's also a different demographic.
It is.
Whereas I feel like in this demographic in the 90s, like you had people that were coming to see big, you know, stars, mostly white guys.
I don't know though, dude. Bad Boys.
True. But Will Smith and Martin Lawrence like really hadn't done a whole lot of like action at that time.
That's true. Yeah.
So like, I mean, Independence Day, but Independence Day was an ensemble.
Right, very much so.
And I don't honestly know how much Martin Lawrence had done outside of his television show at that point in his career in stand-up.
That's a good point.
Whereas, but you look at it other times, and really the only other notable name of in the action genre that was a black man, I would actually say would be Wesley Snipes.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, in the 90s it would just be Wesley Snipes. And Will Smith was, like you said, like he was an up-and-comer in the action game, but I mean, he did really strong.
He did.
Yeah.
But he was always like partnered. With the exception of Bad Boys, he was always partnered with Tommy Lee Jones, Kevin Kline or whoever he did.
Wild
for
Wild West.
Wild
yeah,
West.
Kevin Kline.
But like
Jeff Goldblum. Yep.
Jeff Goldblum. Like I really wouldn't say like he got to like really prove himself as a legitimate actor probably until Ali in 2001, with which I believe he was actually nominated for an Oscar for.
Wow. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we kind of like opened up this like can of worms, and I want to reel it back in.
Sure.
But I do think that this stuff's like really important, but I think that this movie's narrative and the motives of what motivate the quote unquote bad guys of this movie aren't actually wrong.
Sure.
Like we as Americans, like we've changed the narrative of our history so many times, and we wonder why it keeps happening. It's because we're not learning from the mistakes. We're getting 2 or 3 generations into it and being like, "Oh, like this is bad." Like, you know, you look at someone like Rodney King and what he experienced in the 90s, and then you come into George Floyd last year.
Sure.
And it's like in 30 years we've literally learned nothing. I mean, police brutality continues. Sure. We're starting to finally see like some tinge of justice, but it's very minor and it's not being talked about.
Yeah. I really don't have a lot to add to that.
Sorry, this is something that I've become like kind of passionate about in the last year.
Sure.
But, I mean, Frank Hummel, I mean, he's not wrong.
Yeah.
And I hate that, like, you know, he's perceived as this, like, bad guy because he is coming up against of who we deem as...
The quote-unquote good
yeah.
guy. Yeah, I mean, he's an antagonist. You know, that's, I think... That is really just the best name for his position as a role. You know, he is an antagonist because he does. He very much like he sets himself up as an antagonist, not as an evil man. You know.
Sure. You want to know something? Something interesting. I have some. I actually have some trivia facts here.
No surprise at all.
So. This first one comes with, I will lead this and then we'll transition to talk about Sean Connery.
Sure.
Or Sir Sean Connery.
Wait, was he knighted, really?
He was knighted, yes.
Wow, okay.
So he insisted that the producers build him a cabin for him on Alcatraz, as he didn't want to travel from the mainland to the island every day.
Oh my gosh.
He got his wish.
Of course he did.
Which... It's such a John Mason thing too. So it's like not only is he asking for this because, you know, I can agree with him on that one, but it's very much like if you want me to do this movie.
I love that there isn't. I mean, I assume, I don't know if it's still there, but like there could potentially very well still be a cabin on Alcatraz Island built for Sean Connery 25 years ago.
It's like his vacation home.
That's beautiful. All right, more trivia.
More trivia. Okay. This is one that I really I'm trying to find one that I saw that I read but I liked. So according to director Michael Bay, the script was written much more straight and serious than the final film, which this film is pretty serious in tone for the most part.
Yeah, it's not an action comedy. That's not what it is.
No, and some of the best lines that I think that obviously we talked about this before we started is Sean Connery is like trying to give Nicolas Cage a motivational speech. How does it start?
So Nick Cage, I'll set it up. So Nick Cage is talking about like, you know, Sean Connery's like trying to get him to like not back down, like you got to go in there and you got to get this done. And Nick Cage is like, You know, because they're on the field, and Nick Cage's character he's an FBI agent, but he works. He's a chemist.
Whoa! He's a biochemist.
Okay, he's a biochemist. He's still a chemist. He's still not a field op. You know, so he's never really been on the field. He's never been in a terrorist type situation before. And so Sean Connery's trying to just give him a kick in the pants, and he's like, I'll do my best. I'll do my best. You know, and Sean Connery's. Do you want to deliver the line?
I remember the second half of the line.
Okay, so Sean Connery, we'll duo this. Sean Connery goes, losers complain about their best.
Winners go home and the prom queen.
It was so good.
I don't know why my Sean Connery impression sounded like Bane.
It didn't. It sounded like Tom Hardy, but that's fine.
We've established that you have not seen the HBO Max Harley Quinn series yet, so that's also true. So most of the humorous moments that came in this movie were actually improvised during filming, which I'm so glad.
Fantastic
that they did that.
Yeah.
And I can kind of see that because like there are some lines, especially like after they've been captured and Nicolas Cage is just kind of like monologuing and lying on the cell floor, and he's talking like he's just improvising, and like he says something about Zeus's like butthole.
How in the name of Zeus's butthole did you get out of your cell?
So like there's that moment. So there's that moment, and then but like I can just see that there's like so much that they improvised here.
Yeah.
I mean, while we're on Nicolas Cage, like, can we just talk about him for a second?
Oh, we talk about him for an hour.
Oh, we probably will. I really enjoyed the way that he played this role.
Same.
I loved the evolution of his character, the way that he was like very naive.
Yeah.
And the first interaction that he has between him and Mason, where Mason's like in the interrogation room and they're like, oh, we need you to like go make him sign this paper that was basically gonna give him his freedom in exchange for doing this op.
Yeah.
And he's like just trying to be like the big bad tough guy. Totally nervous because this is like the first time like he's ever been in the field.
Yeah.
And just some of like just his interactions with Connery were so priceless. He's
they
like,
were great.
Make me or tell me, do you want a coffee? He's like, no thanks, I'm fine. And he's like, no, you're supposed to offer me coffee.
Yeah, it's so great. It's really great. It's Nick Cage really owns the role in a lot of ways, and you never feel like you never feel like it's forced. You know, like Nick Cage is known for being like yelling and kind of random and kind of like that sort of thing. But the times when he gets that way are times when he's like extremely stressed. He's got nervous tics and there's things happening. Like he's under a lot of pressure, and it's really, really great. It's handled really, really well. I really felt like, and I hope this is not just me being a giant fan of National Treasure 1 and 2, but I really felt like this movie kind of gave us glimpses in certain ways, Nick Cage and otherwise, of like kind of what those movies would become. Because Nick Cage in this is, he's a book guy. He's very much a nerd. He's very, very smart. And, you know, it's almost like you're kind of seeing Sean Connery teach him how to be quick on his feet in the field and like BA in the field, and like kind of what you get in the aftermath of it all is more of like a Ben Gates type character.
Yeah, well, we reached the end, and he gets those like that note from Mason, and then it's like kind of like what feels like a post-credit scene.
Yeah,
they go into the church, and he like gets this like little tube of like negatives, and he's like, "Hey, babe, you want to know who shot Ben Gates?" My first thought when we got there was
JFK.
JFK. When we got there was this is a freaking prequel
Yeah.
for Ben Gates.
Right. That's the thing is like there are a couple parts of the movie that really just kind of feel like this spawned National Treasure, at least as an idea. Like it had to have.
But he feels so green. And there's such a natural component that Cage brings to this role.
Yeah.
Because like he's just playing it just so incredibly like naive, and you know he always tries to act like he's got his big boy pants on.
Yeah. And
then when like the steel hits the metal, like he's just like no.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. He's for sure.
And it's just it's some of the funniest sequences in here. I really enjoyed the way that he just kind of played it, and then by the time that he does ultimately become the action hero of the movie, it's like an hour and a half in.
Oh, it is. It's forever in. Yeah.
But like by the time that like he takes his first shots of the gun, like it feels so satisfying.
It does. And you like they really make a point to like emphasize it because they made a point earlier on that he, never been in the field, never shot anybody, had a gun, but that's about it. It's because he's an FBI agent. He's issued a gun. But yeah. And they make a really awesome, like, big deal out of it. Mason's character does, or Sean Connery's character, Mason, does. And he's like, I'm really glad you didn't hesitate any longer than you did. And it's just really great. Like, but you're right. Like, he's very, very green in a lot of ways. But he knows, I'm going to say this, he knows that he knows what he knows. So in some ways he like doesn't back down because I think he knows his place, but he also knows that like he needs two legs to stand on because he is like freaking out. Yeah.
That was something that I really admired about his character too, was the fact that he had that understanding.
Yeah.
But I think one of the best sequences and proof of that concept is the first time that him and Mason are like finally arrive in the morgue where they're holding all the bombs. Well, most of the bombs.
Yeah.
And he's like trying to explain it to Mason, and Mason's just like dumbfounded by how intelligent this guy is.
Yeah.
Like in his element. And then we get to kind of see Mason kind of in his element later, where those roles are reversed.
Yeah,
and it's one of the best sequences in the movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Just them being able to play off of each other the way they did, where like again like what's his name? Goodspeed. His character is like freaking out because he knows what he has to do, but he also knows what he's holding is this very unstable chemical weapon, and he's like trying to get Mason to help him, and he's like, just hold it, just take it, and you can tell like Mason's character is like, all right, this is not my wheelhouse, I'm just gonna do what you say.
Sean Connery in that scene is just so good.
So good.
His like he's not saying anything, but just the way that he's like reacting to Nicolas Cage's mannerisms is so funny.
Yeah, they're both very much like, I feel like they're very good actors when it comes to just that. Their facial expressions, their mannerisms, and things like that. They can convey a lot. Not everybody can, Keanu Reeves. So, it's really cool to watch their chemistry.
No, you're breathtaking. So I think we look at movies from two completely different ways, and I love looking at like what's on the surface. But again, I'm always the guy that brings the trivia to the podcast.
Yeah.
I'm always the guy that's kind of like looking for like the technical details.
Sure.
And there is it's probably like 45 minutes into this. It's like nearing
the car crash scene,
the car chase scene.
Yeah.
The way that was shot, was so good. Like the way that they use like ground angles and like lower shots, like looking up.
Yeah, like, I even pointed out like I don't think because I love watching out for product placement in films and shows, and so they do this really cool angle. And I pointed this out during the movie, like where there's like a camera angle from the like more or less where the tailpipe would be at the back of this Ferrari that like Cage's character commandeers. And it's like a really weird angle. Like, why would they shoot it there? But I think it has a lot to do with the fact that like you never, from that angle, you cannot see Ferrari's logo. Yeah, so it's really interesting. But you're right; they have a lot of shifter angles. So at the first when he grabs the car, you can they point out that it's a stick shift. So he grabs a stick shift, and you see it from the top. And then every other time you see inside the car, it's from the angle of the stick shift, looking up at him while he's like working the shifter. It's great.
Yeah, it's a really, really great sequence that throws you into the intensity of that scene.
Yeah,
way more than I think. Most famously, scenes that are similar to that, obviously would come from Fast and Furious.
Sure.
But they aren't done as well because you're always you're never in the angle looking up at the driver, you're always to the side. And I think that just showing it, the sequence in which he shows the Humvee actually hitting the train, and the train actually sliding off is such a throwaway moment to the casual
the trolley
viewer. The trolley, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's done so well. It's so well done in that regard to me, because I just feel like it really allows the viewer to be placed right in the midst of that just intensity and insanity that you're viewing.
Yeah. It's a great sequence. It's a really fun car chase. You were talking about earlier, there are parts of the movie that seem a little bit too long. There are parts of that car chase that I thought could probably have been trimmed down.
I loved it. If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now, and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
I really enjoyed it, but there was just so much going on and not a lot of development. But there was a little bit of development, because that's when you kind of sort of, that's when Mason finds his daughter, because he's on the car phone or whatever. It's really it's really funny, but it's really a kind of important moment.
I would have preferred that scene to go on a little bit longer, but also too, it's probably at that moment that you kind of get to see the dynamic that is going to be carried throughout the rest of the film for Mason and Goodspeed.
Sure.
Where he is the one that calls him, and then when he calls the FBI, but then he realizes that, oh, hey, wait, this is his daughter. He's trying to make amends. He's trying to connect. He's trying to be a genuine father.
Yeah.
And then when the police show up, he's kind of at a loss for words. So Goodspeed kind of steps in and saves the day, and he's like, no, your father's helping us with a special secret mission. I can't tell you, it's confidential.
Yeah. Because otherwise, it just looks like, from her perspective, like, oh, my long lost dad who went to jail is now getting drugged back to jail.
Yeah.
You know, and I love, like, again, I cannot say enough about just the dialogue between Connery and Cage in this movie. Fantastic. And that was one of those little moments where, like, Connery is just like, his character is like, thank you. You know, he's like, you could have handled that a lot less gracefully, and you didn't. You know, and like just really like kind of tips his hat to him.
It really shows you too the heart that Goodspeed has throughout the course of it.
Yes,
which is something that reverbs so gracefully throughout the rest of this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I feel like a lot of the other characters that you're given, whether it's, whether it's Humboldt's character or some of the other officials in the government or whatever, whose names I never remembered for some reason. You're given a lot of like really rash, heartless characters who kind of just want to TCB. You know, they just want to get things done. And it's really great. Like, Nicolas Cage just holds the whole movie together in so many ways.
I would argue elsewhere, like Nicolas Cage is great, but Connery remains my favorite part of this movie.
Really? Yeah. I mean, he's awesome. I think like, it's funny. While Josh and I were watching this movie, I was like, it would be kind of cool to do like a podcast of every movie that Sean Connery ever did. Probably take a lot longer, but even if we didn't podcast about it, it'd be fun. I think he'd be a fun actor to just look, just study in that angle, because he's awesome. He does so well in this film, and we were talking about like what Cage movie do we want to do this month, and I immediately I was like, you know what, I think we should do The Rock, because Sean Connery died this year, and be a shame to let a year go by before we like really talked about him.
Yeah, he also, in wake of his death, we talked about last year, For Victims and Villains, our mother podcast / nonprofit. We talked about Goldfinger in his memory, which is my favorite James Bond movie. But you would actually be wrong. 94 credits to his filmography, whereas Nicolas Cage has 106.
Oh, man. Well, there's that.
But all right. So let me lay on some trivia to you. Speaking of Nicolas Cage, it was, according to IMDb, it was actually his idea that his character would not swear. His
character never swears?
Apparently.
Yo, I don't know if I noticed that. Continue.
I didn't. But his euphemisms included "gee whiz." Which is such a Nick Cage thing.
It's so ironic now, like in retrospect. That's so cool. I think that really it kind of goes to further encapsulate like sort of the innocence and like you said, greenness of the character. That's really, really, really cool.
It feels in line with him.
Yeah.
So well.
Yeah.
So this next fact kind of like blew my mind, and so I'm gonna just pause and like kind of give credits to these names.
Okay.
Quentin Tarantino.
Oh God.
Obviously, we know him from Pulp Fiction, Hateful Eight, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Was an uncredited screenwriter on this movie.
Whoa.
Along with Jonathan Henley, whose credits include Armageddon, 2004's The Punisher, Die Hard with a Vengeance, and also he also wrote the shooting script, and Aaron Sorkin, whose credits also include Moneyball and The Social Network.
Wow.
As well as 41 episodes of The West Wing.
Wow. That's some heavy hitters on this Michael Bay. It's Michael Bay production.
Yeah. I really enjoyed this one. So we talked about Sean Connery, we talked about Nicolas Cage, and this movie opens up with Ed Harris.
Sure.
Ed Harris is I would argue probably just one of the strongest factors in this movie.
Yeah.
I mean, we kind of debated on like who the real antagonist of this movie was, but I also think that Harris just delivers a dynamic performance.
Yeah, he does.
And like there were moments where like the scene where they had all of the Marines come up out of to kind of defuse the situation, and then you had all of Harris's men, you had a standoff.
Yeah.
That scene alone was just like so like it was just his performance in that scene was just beautifully shot.
Yeah.
Beautifully performed, and then also kind of when he's like laying out the demands for the first time, you kind of get to understand like really where he's coming from, but also like that he's a smart guy and he's not someone to F with.
Yeah, I love how much they really pointed out like, okay, this guy is extremely well decorated. This guy is in the know. He's experienced and he is knowledgeable, and like. Yeah, they really do a really great job just building up his character, and he really is I guess just really menacing, honestly. For the longest time throughout the movie, they're like it really feels like a stalemate for forever.
I feel like too, like knowing kind of like where his character is coming from and the emotional core that he has. It makes that opening shot where he's sitting in the dark preparing for the funeral of one of his men.
Yeah.
And then like actually going out to their grave. It makes it that much heavier of where his character goes, and like actually he feels a little bit more justified in that regard as well.
Yeah.
That he's not just kind of going out and hoping that the government will listen, but he's willing to. He also has like reservations because, like, you see, like he's a guy that's won the Purple Heart 3 times. Like he's been on like I think they said like 6 tours during like 3 different wars.
Yeah.
Like they really just kind of like laid out like how just intact this guy was when it comes to patriotism.
Yeah.
But he also wants to at the same time sees that there's flaws within the American system and wants change.
I feel like you talk and I just have nothing to add. Yeah, no, it's really great, and I feel like it really builds like a cool dynamic, which you don't see until like the 3rd act, obviously. But there's like really cool moments with this one scene with him and Sean Connery's character. Like honestly, like they both have naval background. Well, they both have military backgrounds, and and I feel like I think you're right in so many ways. Like Connery really carries a lot of this film, and because even in that like interaction, you just get Connery just this like tete-a-tete of like where they're coming from and who they are and that kind of thing. And I love that. Like this one part that stuck out to me was. I love how much, in general, Sean Connery and Nicolas Cage's character, like really are well versed in like history and like philosophy and poetry. It only comes up a couple times, but it's really, really like on the nose. So Sean Connery points out, Humboldt delivers like this quote from I don't know John Adams or somebody like that. It was one of the founding fathers. And Sean Connery is like, oh shoot, what's that poet's name?
It's Oscar Wilde.
Oscar Wilde, thank you. He's like Oscar Wilde said that patriotism is the virtue of the vicious.
Yeah.
And then Humboldt's character just like, I guess like hits him with the butt of his gun between the shoulders, and Sean Connery is just like he falls, but immediately is just like, thank you for proving my point.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, it's so cool. It's so cool. Because I think it really makes you like, I love an antagonist that you feel for. Like I really, really do. But I really like that scene in particular because it's just like that scene if you have felt for Humboldt as an antagonist, as someone who wants justice, who wants things that are right and good, and that's understandably so. That part, that scene really makes you, it's really kind of polarizing. It makes you double like think about like, oh man, like, you know, sure, this guy's like motives are good, but what are his means, and like that kind of thing. And yeah, I don't know, it's interesting.
Yeah, and speaking of something else that is interesting, speaking of Ed Harris, the thing that, so in the movie, he gets in by means of like infiltrating a tour group, basically. They Alcatraz is now kind of like this like tourist spot, and there's a part in the tour where you can actually like get into the cells. And like this is kind of where the men take over, and they have the hostages. They said that Ed Harris has said that when they shot the scene leading up to that, the guy that plays the tour guide in this, for whatever reason, he just could not stop laughing. He's like, I just had the giggles all day.
Okay.
This is random. But something else that I think would have really changed the dynamic of this role was that Arnold Schwarzenegger was actually originally offered the role of John Mason. The time,
really?
Yeah, it would have been such a totally different dynamic.
It would have been. I feel like they would have had to rewrite stuff too because he's Austrian.
Well, it's not only that, but it's like that's like prime, like
mid '90s Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
Oh man, glory days.
Yeah, so like he would go on to play like a similar character in 2013's Escape Plan, but that movie would have just been completely different.
Yeah.
Had he gotten the role of it. I mean, and this is during a time too where like in the 90s, like he's doing like a lot of comedies with like Danny DeVito.
Oh yeah,
and
Junior Twins, Kindergarten Cop. Yeah.
So it's like this kind of also seems out of tone for him because it feels like they're trying to like bring back the 80s Arnolds that did Predator, and it's like, do you really need that? I mean, he would kind of, go on to do other action movies, True Lie, Racer, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But at the time that he was actually handed the script, it was 80 pages, which means it would have been less than an hour and a half. And a lot of the pages were just handwritings and scribbles, and it didn't make sense, basically. He has gone on to say later in a Reddit Ask Me Anything that he regrets not taking the role.
Wow.
So I don't think that this movie would have been the same had he had this.
I would love. Don't get me wrong. I don't wish that would have happened. But to see Nicolas Cage and Arnold Schwarzenegger share the screen that intimately, that would have been incredible. That could have been really cool.
I mean, they're kind of like on the same wavelengths now with like doing the movies that they do, like kind of just doing direct-to-video stuff. So
yeah,
we could see it happen.
Well, I also feel like direct-to-video in general right now is kind of like, that's just where a lot of movies are at, regardless of actor. But, yeah.
So, I guess one of the last things that I want to talk about is we talked about how this movie feels like it sets up a Ben Gates and his journey towards National Treasure. But I also hate the fact that this movie, low-key, sets up is like a precursor in a lot of ways to the Pirates of the Caribbean score.
Oh my gosh.
Pirates of the Caribbean.
I need to bring this up.
Pirates of the Caribbean is like one of my like top 3 favorite film scores of all time.
It's fantastic.
It's such a good film score, and they're both done by Hans Zimmer. But this one, especially in that previously mentioned car chase scene, like it just feels like it's a more like rock and roll version and electrified of that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like, to the point where you'll hear like certain musical passages and it's like, wow, if they had done one note differently, it would be Pirates of the Caribbean. Like, it's wild.
And I can't say that he... I love Hans Zimmer, but I can't say that he wouldn't do it because he did it last year for Wonder Woman 84.
Really?
Yeah. It's a really bizarre choice, but like he like pulls from like Superman themes, and Superman's not in the movie at all.
Yeah, but that's not inappropriate.
But like he just kind of he pulls in from like so many like BVS and like Man of Steel, like
wow.
But it's a Wonder Woman movie.
Sure.
Like,
yeah, but I mean, I think he probably just wants to make it feel like it's kind of coexisting. But I understand what you mean.
So,
yeah.
I think that's it. With do you have anything else you want to add to this movie?
Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, like I did mean to talk about the score a little bit. It's weird because, yeah, it's Hans Zimmer and it's great music. But if I were to have like one actual complaint about this film, it would probably be the score. Not because it's bad, but because there's certain parts it's just like, I don't know if what's happening musically fits fits this movie or what's happening in this movie right now. I think I've heard it said that like some of the best scores are scores you don't notice. Like they fit a movie so well that you don't even remember them or you're not even cognizant of them because it's like, you know, nothing else could have possibly fit the movie better, you know? And I don't think that's a rule and true across the board, but I think that's a really cool thing to point out. And I think that that's the one thing about this movie that I'm just like, the score is good. It's just odd sometimes.
I could definitely see that. There's a scene in particular where I found myself saying like this, the music to this doesn't really seem like it fits.
Right.
It's the scene where they're doing an aerial shot of Alcatraz, and it's right before they fire the bomb or the missile that they were going to do it to level. And I'm just like, this score, it's like strings, but it doesn't feel like cinematic enough.
Right, it's not cinematic is a great word. It's not like cinematic enough or dramatic enough. It's not like sometimes if something's about to happen that could be really bad, what I think of as far as scores go is like you have like long, flowy, kind of sad strings because like you want to, even if that bad thing doesn't actually happen, you want it like to really kind of tug at you, you know? And yeah, it's just weird. It's weird. That's my biggest complaint. That may be my only complaint. I really, really did like this film a lot. But the score is just strange.
It is really weird, and especially for that shot in particular, like the way that it's like shot and like all the stakes that are so high in that, you think, oh man, like this is like a like Battle of New York Avengers like scene.
Sure.
Like I need something that's gonna come in with like lots of horns and
horns,
like just move me and bring me to the edge of my seat, and I just didn't feel that way.
Yeah, for sure.
And so like the score, like I would also say, like to your point, like also Hans Zimmer is a great composer. I don't always agree with him 100% of the time.
Sure.
And I think that this is kind of one of those movies that like I just couldn't get into it musically because it reminded me too much of Pirates, or because it just felt off tone with the rest of the shot.
Yeah, for sure. I think if the movie had been more, like if there had been more on Alcatraz and more like water shots and things like that, or you know, if it felt more like Pirates ended up feeling, maybe different. But yeah, like car chases and stuff, and I don't know, it's weird. Like think about Pirates of the Caribbean music to a car chase. It doesn't make the music worse. It just is really odd pairing.
No, I would come against you and disagree. Actually, I thought that scene in particular, the car chase and the music, just flowed really well.
Nah, that's the scene that really stuck out to me as being like.
But well, think about it. Like when you have that da na 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 na. I really know this. Dun dun da 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 da. Like that one, it's like
that's not. I don't know. We're just gonna have to agree to disagree. Is that it?
That Pirates theme is always like set during like a very like just high like swashbuckling time.
Sure, swashbuckling, but car chase.
But car chase, what is like that scene in particular that I'm thinking of is like the climax of the very first film, where you have like everyone like fighting, and what is a car chase but people in cars just chasing one another as a means to fight one another.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I don't know. I just think it's a tonal difference. I think it's strange.
That's fair. All right, we're going to put this through our Rorschach rating scale. Or wait, no. Sorry.
I was going to say, are we doing that again?
No. All right. So I'm so used to doing that. I'm not used to the new rating system for this podcast yet. Is The Rock worthy of high praise?
I'm so sorry. I can't not think of the wrestler. I can't do it. The Rock is worthy of high praise. Also, this movie.
Yeah, I agree. Both are worthy of high praise. This is such a fun time.
Yeah.
And I action movies are like really hit or miss for me.
Same.
But like this one just nails it, from Cage to the depth of this movie, the heart, the action of it, like Connery and Harris, like everything is just done so well.
Yeah. It's really great. It really like, the dynamics are really great. A lot of even the improvisational like scenes and dialogue are really awesome. The sort of repeating themes about like Cage's character like is hesitant to be a dad, but now his girlfriend's pregnant, and they kind of echo that with like Mason meeting his daughter, and it's just really great. Like the movie opens up loose ends and then ties them all up by the end, and it's a lot of fun.
All right, so this is the last thing I will give you, and then we'll close out. Nicolas Cage has grown frustrated with CDs, compact discs.
Sure.
In his own life, and decided to incorporate a love of old-fashioned LPs into his character, Stanley Goodspeed.
That is fantastic. I love it so much.
I thought you would love that. So we thank you guys to the patrons that have made this episode possible. If you guys would like to get your own Nicolas Cage themed episode, go to patreon.com/victims and villains, where not only are you guys getting a bonus episode every month from us, but you guys are also helping us get mental health resources into schools and conventions as well. Thank you guys so much for partnering with us on our nonprofit side as well. But just want to encourage you guys that if you or someone you know is struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, please reach out. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. There are 130 suicides that take place as of this recording, and when you look at international numbers, there are 800,000 successful suicides that occur yearly. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So you guys can click the links in the descriptions below. It's victimsandvillains.net/hope. Where you guys can find resources including the Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255, and much, much more. But Micah, where can people find you online?
You can find me mostly on Instagram here. It's Mullet Stash, at Mullet STACHE.
You guys can find me on Letterboxd at Captain Nostalgia. And you guys can follow us everywhere at Victims and Villains, and go to victimsandvillains.net to get past episodes of our flagship show, Victims and Villains, movie reviews, and much, much more. Well, until next time, remember that Nicolas Cage is worthy of high praise.
High praise.